Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating new political project, spearheaded by former U.S. Senator Joe Manchin. We're going to use this initiative as a sort of lens to understand the structural realities, the hidden vulnerabilities, and the deep-seated endurance of America's 150-year-old two-party system. Because, for generations, this system has been remarkably stable. Presidents come and go, policies completely change, but that core structure of Democrats and Republicans, it is held incredibly firm. But what happens when someone tries to disrupt the whole shebang right from the middle? So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to quickly cover 5 things: a challenge to the system, the disappearing political center, the rise of independence, breaking the two-party grip, and finally, can the center hold? All right, let's jump right into part 1, a challenge to the system. We're looking at how a 150-year-old structure is being tested right now. So former Senator Joe Manchin just launched this brand new initiative called the Independent Leadership Council. To really get what this is all about, we need to look at its ground game. On paper, the mission is pretty straightforward. Find and back leaders who are actually independent enough to work with Republicans when they agree, work with Democrats when they agree, and push back against both sides when it's best for the public. Sounds like common sense, right? But honestly, in today's Washington, that is kind of a radical approach. They are literally prioritizing pragmatic problem-solving over strict party loyalty. Now, here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. This is not a new national political party, and it's definitely not a presidential campaign. Starting a third party from scratch in the U.S. is, well, it's a nightmare. You have to navigate a maze of different ballot access rules in all 50 states, untangle crazy campaign finance laws, and spend decades just building a foundation. By explicitly choosing not to be a third party, this council is cleverly bypassing all those massive roadblocks, hoping they can just influence the existing system from the inside. Which brings us to Section 2, the disappearing political center. Seriously, where did the middle go? Think about the vanishing bridge in Washington. For a huge chunk of the 20th century, American politics actually had a lot of ideological overlap. You had conservative Democrats, you had moderate Republicans. They argued, sure, but compromise was the norm, and major bills passed with real bipartisan support. Now, contrast that with today. That overlap? It's basically gone. We're left with these highly polarized, strict progressive and conservative silos. The gap between them is so huge now that compromising is frequently viewed as a weakness instead of, actual leadership. So, what's driving this? Did politicians just suddenly get more stubborn? Not at all. It's because the modern incentives in our system literally reward polarization over practical problem solving. Think about it. Social media algorithms actively boost highly charged emotional content. Cable news hypes up the conflict instead of the resolution. Primary elections force candidates to appeal to their most extreme, loyal voters rather than the average citizen. And the campaign finance system. It constantly energizes those exact same extreme bases. It is a giant structural feedback loop pushing everyone away from the center. Let's move on to part 3, the rise of independence. This is what you might call a quiet transformation. While politicians are sprinting toward the extremes, something amazing is happening with everyday voters. The sheer scale of this shift is staggering. Millions of Americans are flat out rejecting party labels. When you look at recent surveys, more people are calling themselves independents than Democrats or Republicans. It's driven by this profound, widespread loss of trust in our political institutions. A lot of folks just feel like both major parties spend way more time attacking each other than actually fixing things. But wait, that brings up a really fascinating and honestly kind of maddening question. Political scientists call it the independent voter paradox. Basically, if everybody is an independent now, why does our two-party system look exactly the same as it always has? Well, here is the kicker. It turns out that changing your political identity to independent is super easy, but actually changing who you vote for, that's a whole different ballgame. People might reject the label on a survey, but when it's election day and they step into the voting booth, actually, scratch that. When the rubber really meets the road, they still reliably pull the lever for the Democrat or the Republican. That behavioral paradox is one of the biggest hurdles any centrist movement has to overcome. All right, Section 4, breaking the two-party grip. Let's look at the actual structural barriers keeping the system locked in place. History tells a pretty clear story here. Independent movements totally flare up when the country is deeply dissatisfied. Back in 1912, Teddy Roosevelt's Progressive Party really shook things up. Fast forward to 1992, businessman Ross Perot launched this massive historic run. And now, in 2024, we've got Joe Manchin's council. But the hard truth? While these movements catch fire, sustaining them across multiple elections is incredibly tough. American politics is stubbornly resilient. To put this into perspective, let's look back at Ross Perot as a benchmark. In 1992, he captured nearly 1 in 5 votes nationwide, almost 20%. That is an absolute massive achievement for an outsider. And yet, he hit a hard ceiling. The very next day, the two-party system remained completely unshaken. So why couldn't a guy with 20% of the vote break the system? It's the math. The structural math of American elections heavily stacks the deck against outsiders. The biggest roadblock is our winner-take-all electoral rules. In our system, coming in second place gets you exactly 0 power. So voters get scared they're going to quote-unquote waste their vote and just pick one of the top 2. Add to that the fact that major parties have decades of established donor networks, automatic ballot access, endless legal teams, and huge institutional perks. Outsiders, they have to build all of that from zero.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5. Can the center hold? How do we even define success for independents?
For a group like the Independent Leadership Council, success probably isn't just about winning a bunch of seats right out of the gate. It's more like a step-by-step game of forcing the existing system to change its tune. Step 1 is just proving that a candidate running on practical problem-solving can actually win votes. Step 2 is putting enough heat on the major parties that they're forced to start courting moderate voters again. And Step 3, the Holy Grail, making compromise politically valuable again, instead of a liability. But, there's a huge wildcard today that Perot and Roosevelt didn't have: digital technology. While the old-school parties have the traditional advantages locked down, independents are betting that modern digital tools can finally level the playing field. Today, you can raise millions through grassroots small-dollar donations, talk directly to voters on social media, and completely bypass the traditional media gatekeepers. It lowers the barrier to entry just enough that a really well-organized independent push might actually be able to compete. So the launch of this council is essentially a real-time test of our democracy. Millions of us are exhausted by the division and just want some practical leadership. But channeling all that public frustration into organized, lasting action takes a massive amount of patience and resources. So leave you with this question to chew on. Does your vote at the ballot box actually reflect your real, nuanced views? And are we watching the start of a brand new chapter in American democracy, or is this just another fleeting experiment that the two-party system is going to absorb? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring these ideas.